Petra was a city for the living, but all around, looming large close-by houses, market stalls and temples were reminders that Petra was also a city of the dead.
Only a few percentages have even been dug. 85% is still under the ground. There's so much more to discover.
For more than 2 millennia, the world has looked to Petra as a wonder of beauty and permanence. We have been captivated by the flawless facade of the Treasury, convinced that it represents the pinnacle of stone carving. But we were wrong. In 2024, for the first time in history, a drill was permitted to pierce the forbidden bedrock directly beneath this monument. What archaeologists uncovered was not gold, nor the legendary riches of pharaohs. What lay below was a truth sealed by violence and fear. A chamber had been closed not to safeguard what was inside, but to separate it from the outside world forever. Petra and the royal tomb hypothesis. To grasp the weight of what has just been found, we must first return to the illusion that history has carefully constructed. Petra, known in antiquity as Rakhmu, is more than a city. It is a natural fortress, an oasis embraced by sheer sandstone cliffs rising from the harsh deserts of Jordan. In the 1st century BCE, the Nabateans, masters of trade and hydraulic engineering, transformed this place into a center of immense wealth. They controlled the flow of incense, spices, and silk from Arabia to the Mediterranean, amassing fortunes that allowed them to rival Rome in architectural ambition. The crown jewel of this realm is Al-Khazneh, commonly called the Treasury. To reach it, every visitor must pass through the Sikh, a narrow natural gorge stretching for more than a kilometer. The path functions as a psychological corridor. The darkness and constriction compress the senses. And then, as the canyon suddenly opens, the treasury erupts into view in a blaze of light and proportion, nearly 40 meters high and carved directly into a single rock face, adorned with Corinthian columns and intricate sculptural details. The monument stands as a declaration of absolute power. For centuries, Western scholarship and archaeology have maintained a firm consensus about its purpose. Based on architectural analysis and comparisons with monuments at Hegra, most experts concluded that the treasury served as a royal tomb, possibly the resting place of King Aretas IV, the greatest ruler of the Nabateans. Other theories suggested it functioned as a temple, a library for sacred documents, or even a treasury in the literal sense, whatever its precise role. All agreed on one point: it was commemorative, built to honor, to inspire awe, and to assert status. This consensus created a psychological shield around the monument. Millions arrive, take photographs, listen to stories of ancient kings, and depart convinced that Petra has been decoded. We look at the bullet scars on the stone urn at the summit, left by treasure hunters who once believed gold was hidden inside, and we smile at their naivety. We trust that modern science, armed with precise measurements and textual analysis, has captured Petra's true nature. The rose-red sandstone appears to have told its entire story. There is nothing dangerous here, only history and art. That reassurance formed the foundation upon which the 20th century stood. Evidence of a subsurface void beneath the treasury. Yet if you set aside the guidebooks and listen instead to those who have lived with this desert for generations, the perfect image begins to crack. The Bedouin, who called Petra's caves home long before it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site, have long passed down different stories. They speak of forbidden zones, of places where livestock refuse to tread, and of strange sounds rising from beneath the earth. One of the most intriguing details lies directly beneath the feet of visitors. At certain points across the broad forecourt before the treasury, a heavy stomp or the strike of a metal tool does not produce the dull thud of compacted soil. Instead, it releases a hollow resonance, deep and lingering. It is the sound of a vast void, something waiting below the dust and sand. This is not a recent observation. Archaeologists recognized the phenomenon decades ago. In theory, investigating a cavity beneath one of the world's most iconic monuments should have been a priority. In practice, the opposite occurred. For more than half a century, every proposal to excavate the forecourt has been systematically denied. Jordanian heritage authorities, along with international advisory bodies, have consistently cited safety and preservation concerns. The sheer volume of visitors, they argued, made excavation impractical. The risk of destabilizing the structure above was deemed too great. These explanations appear reasonable from an administrative perspective. Yet, to investigators, they introduce an anomaly. Archaeology is usually a race toward the unknown. Why has it become an effort to preserve the status quo? The refusal was not a single decision, but a solid administrative wall spanning successive leaderships. It created the sense that the hesitation was not about damaging stone, but about what might emerge if the ground were disturbed. Did officials fear discovering something that would alter the historical narrative that draws millions of tourists? Or was there an unspoken warning from the past that modern custodians, whether knowingly or not, were obeying? The existence of a void beneath the surface is no longer speculation. It is a physical reality confirmed by sound. What remains suspicious is the silence surrounding it. If it were merely an ancient drainage system or a storage chamber for grain, why guard it with such extreme caution? A fracture has opened in the story of Petra. There is a profound difference between protecting heritage and concealing truth. Geophysical survey and discovery of a hidden structure. The year 2024 marked a rare turning point, a narrow opening in the wall of prohibition. A joint research team composed of archaeologists from the University of St. Andrews, the American Center of Research in Jordan, and the Jordanian Department of Antiquities finally secured approval for a limited survey. The conditions were strict beyond compromise. No harm, not even the slightest, could be inflicted upon the structure above. This would not be an adventure in the style of Indiana Jones. It would be geological surgery executed with absolute precision. The first step was not excavation, but vision. The team deployed ground-penetrating radar and electrical resistivity sensors to scan the entire forecourt. The principle behind this technology is straightforward. Electromagnetic waves are transmitted into the Earth, and the time it takes for them to return is measured. Variations in the signal reveal differences in density below the surface. On computer screens inside a field tent, bands of color began sketching an invisible landscape. At first, the data showed only natural sediment and scattered rock. Then, as the scanner passed to the right of the Treasury, the signal shifted abruptly. A geometric form emerged from the geological noise. It possessed right angles. It displayed straight vertical planes. Most striking of all, its interior density suggested emptiness. The scientists labeled it Anomaly C. This was not a natural cave. It was an engineered structure, a chamber created with deliberate intent. Guided by these findings, archaeologists began a careful test excavation. They removed each layer of soil methodically, sifting every grain for pottery fragments or coins that might help establish a date. As they descended, the earth grew increasingly compact, evidence of centuries of undisturbed pressure. The mood at the site shifted from scientific curiosity to palpable tension. When their trowels reached the target depth, stone emerged. It was not a collapsed entrance or a decayed wooden door. It was a constructed barrier, a stone wall built to block all access. The sandstone blocks had been cut into precise rectangular forms and fitted together with an exceptionally strong binding mortar. There were no handles, no hinges, no mechanism to open it from the outside. This was a seal, Its method of construction carried a clear message from Nabatean masons 2,000 years ago. This place was not meant to be reopened. It was meant to remain closed forever. The Chamber of Chaos. The decisive moment had arrived. Engineers began dismantling the ancient seal stone by stone. When the final block was removed, a black void opened before them. At once, a rush of cold air poured outward, carrying the stench of organic decay, soot, and mineral dust trapped for 2 millennia. Those at the site instinctively stepped back. It was the smell of a dead world, an atmosphere untouched by fresh oxygen since the age of Rome. High-powered floodlights were lowered into the darkness, tearing through the black interior. What emerged shattered every romantic notion of an orderly and dignified royal tomb. This chamber was the scene of profound chaos. Visual records revealed a disturbing distribution of human remains. 12 skeletons were identified in total, yet their arrangement told conflicting stories. In one corner, several sets of bones rested in relatively careful positions within niches carved into the wall, suggesting deliberate burial. But across most of the floor lay others piled together, twisted into unnatural postures. Preliminary analysis on site pointed to abnormalities in the skeletal structures. Some rib cages had been crushed inward. Limbs were bent at angles inconsistent with natural decomposition. Skulls lay scattered, detached from their spines, or pressed beneath the weight of other bodies. There were no traces of luxurious burial shrouds or golden ornaments typical of Nabatean royal interments. Instead, the disorder evoked haste, panic, and violence. Amid the tangled remains, archaeologists discovered a single intact object. It was a ceramic cup. Its form was striking, immediately recalling the popular image of a sacred chalice, a vessel with a pedestal base and flared rim. Simple yet refined, it rested near the hand of one skeleton, as though that person had tried to grasp it in their final moments. Yet, inside the cup, and within the fragments of broken jars nearby, there was no wine or dried incense. Instead, a thick, dark residue clung stubbornly to the ceramic surface. The contrast was stark. On one side stood the precise geometry of the chamber itself. On the other lay the disarray of death. On one side, a symbolically shaped cup. On the other, bodies discarded as if they no longer mattered. The space did not feel sacred. It felt like a storage room for the dead, or worse, a sealed crime scene. The other face of greatness, standing among the skeletons beneath the earth and looking upward toward the ceiling, only a few meters below the foundation of the magnificent Treasury. A reversal of perception began to take shape. We are compelled to reconsider the relationship between the monument above and the chamber below. Conventional logic tells us that tombs are built to honor the dead. Here, however, the arrangement suggests the opposite. This chamber lies directly beneath the main entrance, the most structurally and symbolically significant position. If this were truly the tomb of King Aretas IV, as earlier theories proposed, why would his remains, or those of his attendants, have been treated with such brutality? Why are there no inscriptions, no carved praises upon the walls? A colder hypothesis began to take hold. The Treasury may not be a shrine at all, but a monumental lid. Its grandeur might not have been intended to display wealth, but to function as both a spiritual and physical seal. In ancient thought, the most effective way to suppress a dark force or conceal a catastrophic event was to erect a sacred structure above it. The shattered and heaped skeletons suggest a tragedy unfolding in a short span of time. Perhaps a devastating epidemic swept through Petra, forcing the Nabateans to gather infected bodies into this chamber and seal it to prevent further spread. Or darker still, the remains may testify to an internal purge, a massacre, or a collective sacrifice meant to appease the gods during a time of crisis. Later concealed beneath an imposing monument, The ceramic cup, the only object that appears ritual in nature, becomes deeply unsettling in this context. If the residue within were identified as poison or blood, the narrative would shift from tragedy to organized crime. The exquisite carved columns above would no longer stand simply as a triumph of human artistry. They would become the most convincing mask in history, diverting the gaze of the world for 2,000 years from the grim reality decomposing beneath. The silence of the chamber would not represent eternal peace. It would be the result of a systematic and ruthless erasure of memory. Forensic analysis and the delay in public disclosure. As news of the discovery began to leak beyond archaeological circles, a quiet tremor spread outward. Yet instead of bold declarations about rewriting history, the response from authorities grew noticeably restrained. The most critical samples, including the residue from the ceramic cup and bone fragments bearing signs of physical trauma, were transferred to leading forensic laboratories for DNA sequencing and toxicological analysis. To date, however, the detailed findings have not been fully released. At the site, biosecurity protocols were tightened. Opening a sealed chamber filled with ancient organic material always carries the risk of dormant pathogens or toxic fungal spores. But the present caution appears to extend beyond medical concern. There is an ethical and philosophical hesitation beneath the surface. What exactly are we doing with these dead? Above ground, life continues uninterrupted. Tour guides still recount stories of pharaohs and hidden treasure. Visitors pose before the rose-colored columns, unaware that only meters beneath their feet, shattered skeletons are being catalogued into evidence bags. The contrast is chilling. The modern world consumes Petra as spectacle, while its harsher reality is dissected in shadow. The larger questions remain suspended without official answers. What is the dark residue inside the cup? Why has the DNA analysis taken so long? Does it reveal that these individuals were not Nabatean at all, but prisoners, outsiders, or members of a lineage deliberately erased? Or more disturbing still, does the data suggest that they all died at once from an unnatural cause that modern science struggles to classify? The delay in disclosure leaves the uneasy impression that we stand before another sealed threshold, one marked not by stone, but by the quiet control of knowledge for reasons yet unknown. Historical implications of the 2024 discovery. When the dust finally settled and the transport vehicles carried the equipment away, Petra returned to its ancient stillness. Yet for those who know what lies beneath, the city will never appear the same again. The most pressing question is not the identity of the 12 skeletons, but the motive behind their erasure. Why would a sophisticated and prosperous civilization like the Nabateans resort to such brutality at the very heart of their capital? The Treasury, the Jewel of Jordan, now appears less a monument and more a colossal lock of stone. The hidden chamber was not an accident, not a forgotten cavity, but an essential component of the structure itself. It is a foundation of bone and silence supporting the beauty above. The events of 2024 force us to confront an uncomfortable truth about human history. Our grandest monuments are often built to conceal our darkest secrets. The Nabateans left behind a ruthless test of perception. We see what we choose to see: splendor, artistry, romance. Beneath that surface lie rituals, deaths, and fears that even their creators sought to bury forever. The stone barrier has been opened. The secret has emerged. Yet relief does not follow. Instead, there is a new weight of awareness. Petra still stands radiant beneath the desert sun. But from this moment on, when we look upon the facade of Al-Khazneh, we will no longer see only a palace carved in stone. We will see a massive lid pressing down upon a scream from 2,000 years ago. And the most haunting question remains: If beneath one of the most beautiful symbols of the ancient world lies a chamber of horror, how many more unsettling truths lie waiting in the shadows beneath the rest of this city, and beneath the foundations of human history itself?